Hello. Hi. First, I want to thank this committee, but also Marianne and Kelsey. Thank you very much for all your help and for listening to my story. So it is an honor to be here, so thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share 3 short stories. And I'm also going to uh, make sure that I incorporate one of my favorite passions and hobbies, which is photography. Um, so yeah, I had a picture of my son and I in there. Uh, One of the things I like about photography is you can show a lot of things in one photo. There's a lot of different meanings. As the saying goes, there's pictures worth 1,000 words. I do believe that you can demonstrate so much emotion and capture very important images through photography. So I'm going to go ahead and start by giving a definition of 3 really important aspects of photography and then start my stories from there. So the first one is aperture. Aperture is very important in photography. It shows how quickly or how much the lens opens or closes to take a picture. And it has different effects on a picture. One is that can show blurriness in some areas and a focal point in the middle, like this picture. Or you can have the whole image uh, be in focus through aperture. So with that in mind, I'm gonna go ahead and open up by sharing a little bit about my background. I was born in Mexico City. My parents were also from Mexico City, my grandparents as well. So we go back 3 generations. We are still called Chilangos, for those that know. It's a term that they give us over there. This was the house that my grandfather built. He started from the first story, built it up to the second, and then kept adding on to it. The room on the top right was actually mine, where I did a lot of travesuras. I got into a lot of trouble from there. I would throw firecrackers at random people. Different story for a different time. But basically, I was with my parents here in LA, and my parents had to make a difficult decision. They had to decide that, as is true was then, as it is now, it's hard to raise kids here in LA. It's very difficult, financially for them at least. My parents, just to give you an idea, they were growing up in Mexico and left their education pursuits in middle school. They didn't finish middle school, so they can help out their homes. So when they came, before they came here, they tried to make a living in Mexico, and it was very challenging for them to find opportunities for a better life for us. So when they came over here to LA with my brother and I, they realized that they couldn't afford having us with them. So they made a very difficult choice of leaving my brother and I with my grandparents while they worked hard here in the US. This is me when I was around 3.5 years old. If you can't tell, I'm very Mexican. But yeah, my brother and I stayed with my grandparents for approximately 2.5 years. It was very difficult for my brother and I because we missed our parents. I was a mama's boy, so I missed my mom, and I'm sure she missed me too. I have a 3.5-year-old now, so just thinking of being separated from my son, I don't even want to think of that. But I did that for 2 years with my brother, and so I remember telling my grandparents that we wanted to reconnect with them, and they knew that it was going to be very difficult because the means that they were going to provide for us to reconnect were going to cause challenges later on in the future. At that time, I didn't care about how or when. I just wanted it now. I wanted my mom. I wanted my dad. And so that's how I wanted to open with the first story. Okay, so the next definition I want to share is shutter speed. Shutter speed is very important in photography. It's the amount of time it takes for the shutter to open and close to take an image. If you do it quick enough, you can capture lighting. If you do it slow enough, it can show a blurriness effect in the image, where it can display almost motion in an image, kind of like here. This is my brother and I. This is in 2012, the first day that DACA was approved. My brother and I we couldn't afford to pay for a lawyer, so we went to CHIRLA, Coalition for Human Rights, Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles. And we went because they were going to offer services on how to apply for DACA. At this time, we started realizing just what it meant to pay those consequences because I was undocumented at this time with my brother. And as probably a lot of you have heard by now, it was very challenging. We didn't have the financial means. we didn't have the opportunities and employments, and we didn't even know who to go to for counseling for our school. It took me 4.5 years to graduate from community college into CSUN. I wear that with a badge of honor now, but back then I was very ashamed of that because I felt like it took me that long to graduate. So when I was in CSUN, I learned to reach out to a counselor. That was the first time I actually felt that I could actually trust someone in an academic institution. My counselor, when I first met with her, I remember just telling her, I'm an AB 540 student. I never had to mention it again. She knew right away what that meant, and I knew that she knew it. And from there on, I went to her every single semester to plan out my classes and to have all of my academic needs met. To this day, that counselor leaves a strong, great image in my head of what a counselor should be like. So again, shutter speed. ISO, also very important when it comes to photography. ISO can bring out details in a dark environment or in a bright environment. If it's very dark, you can crank up the ISO, but you get a very grainy image. If you get it just right, you can get a clear image. That's my son. So fast forward 4 years now, 2016, and I had a very different stage in life at this point. I was married already to a wonderful wife who I love, my best friend, and I also had my son was about to be born. I also had started my grad program in Cal Lutheran for master's in college counseling, and I also left my full-time job as a mental health counselor to become a counselor assistant, so I can get that experience and become a counselor eventually. So this was I was very optimistic at this point in life. This was 2016. And then a lot of tragedies started coming within the span of 1 month. This is about July 2nd was when my son was born. And I know they tell you this, but it isn't until you go through it that you understand. You're always tired. I was a zombie with my wife. We would not sleep at all. He would wake up every hour. I love him, but wow. And so I was in a hospital. This is actually the Ronald Reagan Hospital for those that noticed that. But when I was in a hospital with my wife, we were in and out because a couple of different reasons. But one of them was 2 weeks after my son was born, my brother called me to rush to the hospital because my mother had gotten a stroke. And when I met with a doctor, they told us that she might get worse and that she's going to be paralyzed for half her body for the rest of her life. At this time, fortunately, that didn't happen. But at that stage in life, I didn't know that. I thought that that's what the doctor said. That's what's going to happen. And of course, I'm a zombie state mode because of my son. So it was very difficult. And I was just in grad school. So I was like, can this get any worse? Unfortunately, it did. My mother-in-law passed away a week after that. So month of July 2016, I was in the hospital for 3 different reasons. I thought that my mom and my mother-in-law were going to help me raise my son. And unfortunately, I wasn't even sure if my mom was going to make it. And I know, unfortunately, my mother-in-law didn't make it. It was a very challenging time for me. I didn't know who to go to for advice. I felt like dropping out of school. I felt like I couldn't go to my wife because she's mourning her mom. I felt like I couldn't go to my family because we're very unsure what my mom's going through, so I had to be the strong person in the family. So at the back of my head, I remember that when I went to the orientation to my grad school program, one of the counselors who I met, who was my counselor, told me, hey, if you ever need to talk, you can reach out to me, no matter what you're going through. And that stuck with me. So I remember calling him and emailing him, and we scheduled an appointment. So I remember walking into his office at Cat Lutheran and sitting down on his desk. And I remember thinking, should I just tell him I'm going to drop out? What should I share? Should I let him in my life? Should I not? I was very emotional at that time, but I can tell he cared about what I had to say. He was very open to what I had to share. So as soon as I locked eyes with him, He just said, "How are you?" And just like a faucet just came out. And I remember just crying for a good 2 to 5 minutes. And I'm talking real crying. I like the movies. Like I'm talking mucus and tears and all that stuff. I was a mess. But I remember the counselor took his time to see until I was well enough to explain what was I going through and what I was thinking. And that left a very impactful image in my life. That to this day, that's one of the approaches I want to continue seeing students, and being open and sensitive to what they're going through, and being welcoming and the environment I create as a counselor. That was Dr. Tillapaw at Cal Lutheran. I'm going to share 2 more definitions in photography. The first is what is considered the Trinity of photography. As mentioned before, there's aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. These are very important because they all combined help create an image. If you move the ISO or the aperture, you have to compensate the other 2. So they work in harmony. The next definition is depth of field. It is what is in focus in a picture or what the photographer chooses to be the focal point in a picture. Kind of like the first image with my son and I, who are shaving. The part of the image is blurry, but the main focal point is the middle. That's what a definition of depth of field is. And the reason why I share this is because I saw a lot of similarities between photography and counseling. I feel that photography requires a lot of skills to know how to use ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Same thing with counseling. It requires a lot of skill to take an image. And all of us as counselors have those tools. We just have to make sure that we have an open and welcoming environment where we deal with students. Have quality time to meet the students' needs, like shutter speed. And to make sure that we're sensitive and caring to draw out the needs of students. We have the tools and ability to leave a long-lasting positive image in a student's life. And it's reciprocal. They also leave long-lasting positive image in our life as well. Just like I have those images of the counseling sessions, now I know I'm doing the same for other students. So I encourage you to use those tools as counselors and to make long-lasting, impactful images. Thank you.